We're talking about veterans' benefits right now, myths, rumors, how you could be planning smartly. How do you get those benefits that you earned? To guide us with this topic, we have our speaker today, who is someone who brings both lived experience and professional expertise to this topic. And this expert panelist we have today is a Gulf War military veteran, life member of these disabled American veterans, and he is best known in the senior living industry as the Veterans Benefits Guy. He's certified in long-term care and trained as a federal benefits counselor, and he has helped hundreds of families make smart, informed decisions before applying for VA benefits, Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, you name it. And he is very passionate about our topic today, cutting through the red tape, empowering people with real actionable information so you don't miss out on what you are entitled to. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our very, very loving and powerful speaker today, Mr. Scott Ferguson. Scott, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Dexter, for the warm welcome. And we really appreciate Visiting Angels for supporting our program. And we support them in many ways as well through many of their different franchises around the country, primarily in the Mid-Atlantic region. So, um, as Dexter was saying, I've gained a little bit of experience in these subjects of government benefits over the years. And having had to apply for my own benefits through the VA, I've come to understand that it's not always the most user-friendly system out there. I think many people would agree if you've ever spoken to any veterans that have used the services. Sometimes it can be confusing and cumbersome, and but there are a lot of great benefits out there. We only have an hour today, and I'll try and squeeze in as much information as I can. Uh, but I am going to focus on the benefits that we are primarily asked about that benefit the seniors in the community. Many of the veterans that we serve and their widows are entitled to benefits that they're unaware of. And some of these benefits have been around for a long, long time. One in particular that I'll talk about more a little bit later in the program is the aid and attendance benefit, where the VA will actually deposit money directly into the veteran or the widow's bank account if they meet certain criteria. It is a means tested benefit, and there are other things that need to be met, specifically like wartime dates and what's called an IVAP calculation for income for VA purposes. But we'll cover that a little bit more. I want to start with a couple of benefits that are a bit more simple, that are available to almost all veterans that are out there. And that comes to some of the basics like glasses and hearing aids. Uh, we all get asked about that a lot. Glasses are something that have come a long way. When I was in the military and issued my first pair of glasses, they were the real thick bottle bottom, looking Buddy Holly thick black frame glasses with a wire ear loop so they didn't fall off when you were low crawling through the glass. But now I go and I get my glasses from the VA, and they might not be the most stylish, but they're a lot better than the thick black frames that we used to get. They have a whole lineup of frames. They can do the bifocals with or without the lines. They can do the gradient where it turns dark during the day. But you do need to see a VA doctor. So I do always recommend that if you are a veteran, if you're not plugged into the VA system, that you should get plugged into the system. You would do that by contacting your nearest VA medical center. Sometimes the satellite offices can also help you, but your regional VA medical center is where you should reach out to and speak to the eligibility office. Some basics about how to get registered with the VA to get some of those benefits is contact that eligibility office, and they're going to ask you for a couple of things. They're going to ask the veteran for their discharge papers, or typically called a DD 214. If you do not have a DD-214 or discharge papers, email my office. You can email that at contact@vbap, and we'll be putting that in the chat a little bit later on. So you have our contact information if you do need to reach out to clarify any of these questions. But email us and we'll send you a link over with instructions how to get that from vetrex.archives.gov. And what that is, it's the electronic way to request discharge papers from the VA. It can be done by the next of kin also, and it's an electronic request put into the National Archives or the National Personnel Records Center. Now, I bring that up and I want to point out specifically that the electronic way to do that really is the best way. It is the quickest and it is the fastest way to do that. You can send it in by fax, you can send it in by paper, but it seems that it takes much longer, months rather than days by doing it that way. Doing it electronically, they can send you an email that has a link for that. Now, I did this just to test it out with getting my own DD-214 from the National Archives, even though I do already have a copy. But I put it in there, and lo and behold, I got an email the very next day with a link on it how to download my certified copy. Something that we did find out actually through a family that had used this service, that link has an expiration on it. It's only good for a few days, I think, well, maybe 10 days. So if you are requesting documents, you want to keep an eye on the email that you're using. And if you do see something come in, go to it right away and use that download because it will expire. And if it does expire, they will not send you a second link. They will make you put the request in through fax or email after that. So very important. And if you do have a copy already of those discharge papers, I always encourage everyone only send copies if they're being requested. The reason being, they will say, or they might tell you that, oh, well, we'll send it back. And more recently, they're even telling you they won't send it back. So do not send original copies of anything. Always make a copy and send it when you're applying for your benefits. The reason is, if you have the only original copy, it may truly be the only original copy. There was a fire in July of 1973 in the National Archives Center that destroyed 25% of all military records. So if you have an original copy, it may be the only copy in existence. And if you lose it or you give it to someone and you don't get it back, you may have lost the only evidence there is forever and not be able to obtain your benefits if you no longer have that copy and it's not on record with the VA. So the eligibility office will ask you for a copy of that discharge papers along with a form called a 10-10EZ. It's a very simple form, simple 2 pages. It can be downloaded from the internet if you do a quick search on that. VA form 10-10 and the letters E and Z, Echo Zulu, 10-10EZ. It's a simple form filling out for healthcare benefits. Turn that into the eligibility office with the discharge papers. They would verify the dates of service of that veteran, and then they will plug you into a social worker or the Office of Care Coordination to help you schedule an appointment with a doctor to get the evaluation that you may need, or for them to schedule you with a specialty clinic such as optometry or audiology. Obviously, optometry would be for the glasses. Audiology would be for something like hearing aids. The hearing aids from the VA have come a long way. I have a set of them that I wear. They're great. They connect to the phone. If you have the digital technology and capability of doing that, there's settings from them. You can adjust them from your phone or your computer. You can adjust them based on your environment, like if you're going to a movie theater or if you're in a loud, chatty restaurant or if you're sitting home quietly watching TV. There's different settings for those. They've come a long, long way. Years ago, the VA was known for having terrible hearing aids, and the cups didn't fit well in the ear or the molds. They were uncomfortable. They didn't work well. People would say, I got them from the VA and I just went out and bought another pair anyway because they were so bad. But now I can tell you, they're very high quality. They're very easy to use. They're very comfortable. They're very discreet. Even with my short hair, most people don't know that I have them in, and they're rechargeable. And depending upon the level of hearing loss that you have, there are different types. They can give you the type with the battery if it's needed. And if they do, they will supply the batteries for you. So those are two that we get asked about a lot. Another is a question that we get asked a lot is burial benefits. And I want to point out quickly, there's three main parts to the VA. There's the burial and cemetery. There's the health care, which is the doctors, the hospitals, the prescriptions and things along that lines. That's the healthcare part of the VA. And then there's also the finance part of the VA, which is the pension maintenance centers. There's only three of those in the country. That's the one here in Philadelphia, nearby in Philadelphia, another one in St. Paul, Minnesota, and another in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Philadelphia being the largest of, busiest of those, but they are the ones that are responsible for all of the money that comes out for compensation or improved pension benefits, which the add-on to that is the aid and attendance benefit that I mentioned earlier. But back to the burial part of that, um, people have told me that, yes, hey, we're going to have the VA take care of dad's burial. Okay, my next question usually is, well, which VA cemetery did you register with? So what you should do is contact that VA cemetery ahead of time. They're going to need a copy of that DD 214 that I mentioned, or the separation records. And they're also going to want to know, will anyone else be interred with that veteran, such as a spouse? You can also, an adult disabled child can also be interred with a veteran at a veterans or military cemetery. Funny enough, I've recently found out that up here at Fort Washington, which is not that far from Maryland, it's in Pennsylvania, up along the Delaware River. I'm sorry, not Fort Washington. Washington's Crossing is what it is. It's a beautiful location, but they have a veteran there that is interned and buried with four spouses because they can be buried with multiple spouses. I always thought it would be funny to be a fly on the wall and hear that conversation if all four of those spouses were alive and knew that that was going to happen. I think it might have drove that soldier to his grave a little bit earlier. But anyway, a veteran can be interred with more than one spouse and their location. But you do have to be registered. Obviously, you do have to show that there were marriages to the, I see the little laughing bubbles floating up on the screen here. So, but yes, you do have to get registered with them ahead of time. And the reason I encourage that, now some people will tell you, no, you don't, but the reason is you need to make sure you have that discharge paper. What has happened in the past is someone did not register ahead of time. They didn't know that they didn't have the discharge paper. They called the veteran cemetery. They had to hold on to dad and they would not bury him until they verified his military service. And they had to send for the documents. This is back before they had the electronic version of getting the discharge papers from the National Archives. And they had to keep dad on ice before burying him. And the family was not very happy about that, but the VA cemetery was not going to accept him until they had the verification that he was indeed a veteran and allowed to be buried in that cemetery. So a little bit of advanced planning can go a long way. Be ahead of the curve when it comes to that. You should also place a little bit of funds aside when it comes to burial arrangements. For the VA cemetery, they will take care of the most of that. They will pick up the body, they will transport the body and the remains. They will take care of whatever needs to be done if it's going to be cremation. If it's going to be a traditional burial, they will take care of the embalming. They will provide a very basic casket. They have standard clergy for all religions, that can perform the services. But if you want a special clergy, you may have to pay them for that. If you want an upgraded casket, you will have to pay for that. If you're going to have a luncheon, if you're going to have flowers, other things along that lines, or anything special during for the burial service or the day of the service. Those are things that will have to be paid for separately. So keep that in mind. It's still not a bad idea to put a little bit of funds aside for that. And if you need help with that, our office can help you put those into a funeral trust that is here for veterans, that is in place for veterans to help cover those additional costs. Going back to the three different branches of the VA and the healthcare part of it, there are a variety of other healthcare benefits for veterans as well. Depending upon their financial status and insurance that they carry, many veterans can get some of their prescriptions covered by the VA. Now, if there's a service-connected disability for that rating, then as long as that's 70% or more, that veteran can get 100% of their care through the VA. Also, the prescriptions that go along with that, whether it's service-connected or not. Now, if it's a service-connected disability that is, and they're rated at less than 70%, then it would only be the thing that is service connected that the veteran or the VA is going, the veteran's going to get coverage through the VA. For instance, if it was a Vietnam veteran that was exposed to Agent Orange and they have diabetes, but that diabetes rating is only at, say, 30 or 40 or 50%, they will take care of everything that's associated with that diabetes because it is presumed that the diabetes was caused by their exposure to Agent Orange. So they will give them the test strips, the thing to prick your finger so you can do the little tests. They will supply circulation socks if they need that because that is caused by the diabetes. If they need special shoes or circulation shoes or corrective shoes that's due to the diabetes, the VA will supply that because that's a service-connected disability. Even if it is secondary and the circulation becomes very poor, that veteran may need an amputation and lose a foot or a leg or whatever the case may be. They'll perform the surgery. They'll provide the prosthetic that goes along with it. They will provide the OT and the PT that goes along with that to get them adapted to that, and all of the other services that help support that veteran for those needs caused by that injury or illness brought on by their military service. Um, Once a veteran receives a disability status of 70% or more, the VA will cover 100% of all of their medical needs. Now, if they don't have that rating and you just want to go get medications from the VA, there are certain financial criteria that they may look for. If a veteran is destitute or if a veteran is homeless, they'll have some questions where they may be able to help in those areas. And that would also help trigger some of those additional benefits, potentially getting them additional care through the pharmacy and taking care of their medications. But it's not always just a given right, right off of the top. So you need to go through that eligibility office and verify what benefits would be available. And these benefits need to be prescribed by a VA doctor. So you are going to need a VA doctor. You'll need to go see that VA doctor at least once a year to keep your file status open, and just go for a regular checkup. I mean, that's good advice anyway. Everybody, especially as we get a little bit older, should be seeing a VA doctor on a regular basis, at least that once a year checkup. Um, Other things that we get asked about and oftentimes aren't very well known are what's called presumptive diseases or presumptive awards. I'm sure everyone at this point has probably seen or heard of a commercial that talks about contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. There, between the dates of 1953 and 1987, there were over 700,000 Marines, family members, and support personnel that were exposed to this contaminated water that is known to cause 8 neurological diseases, and cancers. I happen to know a little bit more about this. I learned about it unintentionally when we found out that my dad's Parkinson's and kidney cancer was caused by his exposure to this contaminated water in Camp Lejeune when he was there as a Marine in 1954. Now, he got Parkinson's in around 2015, and this announcement came out in January of 2017. So I immediately applied for him to get the benefits. And luckily, knowing what I know about it and being somewhat ingrained in this, I got his approval turned around in just about 30 days, which was a phenomenal turnaround time for disability compensation. Unfortunately, he did not get to take advantage of those benefits for very long because he died in June of that same year because of his Parkinson's. Now, if there is a silver lining to that black cloud, my mother gets the DIC benefit because my dad's not only his life was cut short due to his illness or injury caused by his military service, also his income was cut short. His Social Security stopped. So if you call the VA and ask, can we can can we continue the veteran's disability for the widow? Their answer, and it is the correct answer, it is no. But sometimes they won't lead you on and let you know that the widow can apply for a DIC benefit. It's called dependency and indemnity compensation. So that DIC benefit is now about $1,658 per month, which is what my mother gets because my father prematurely died due to his illness that was caused by his military service. So it is a good benefit. It is certainly helpful, but obviously it doesn't take his place. So keep in mind that those benefits are out there. Another one that is called presumptive, I mentioned a few minutes ago about contamination of veterans that were in Vietnam contaminated by a chemical called dioxin. For those of you that don't know what dioxin is, it is more commonly known as Agent Orange. It's a defoliant that was used in Vietnam to kill the trees and shrubbery so they could see through the jungle. Um, many soldiers were exposed to this. It causes birth defects, it causes cancers, it causes diabetes. There's a variety of things. There are 14 different illnesses and diseases and cancers that are caused by exposure to Agent Orange. So if you do know a veteran that was in country Vietnam and exposed to that, and also Korea veterans were exposed to it as well. It's not as widely known, but it was used in Korea also. Um, tell that veteran to get registered with the VA and see if they can get any compensation or at least any medical benefits might be helpful for them if they have something that's considered um, a presumptive disease caused by that. Now, let me explain what presumptive disease means. Uh, in this case, we're talking about Vietnam and exposure to Agent Orange. So a veteran no longer has to prove that their illness was caused by Agent Orange if it's one of the ones that's on the presumptive list. And let's take diabetes, for example. If the veteran has diabetes and they were in Vietnam, the VA will automatically presume that that was caused by their exposure to Agent Orange, and therefore they will cover any medications or treatments that they need for the diabetes that was caused by that presumptive disease. So I hope everybody can follow that. And if you do have questions, please let me know. Um, we do have the links that we can share with you for um, information about that and point you in the right direction if you do need help with it. Dexter, I see you popped back up on the screen. Is there a reason that you came on? Do you have a question or a comment that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to read a question that is
Okay,
here, if you don't mind.
absolutely.
So before they pile up. Anyway, we have two
Absolutely.
here.
Sure. Let's go through them as they're coming in.
All right. So here, how do we credential with the VA to be able help their veterans? Is Optum the only way? It says my region is saturated. The closest service provider is over 25 miles away.
So I believe when they're saying the closest provider being 25 miles away, that's probably a VA provider. Now, the VA has what's called community service, and community services are available for veterans that have trouble getting to their VA, or if their VA, I believe, is more than 40 miles away. The veteran can file for travel pay. Or if the veteran has some type of disability or ailment that is preventing them from travel, they can request home-based primary care through their primary care physician. What that means is they would send a primary care physician to their home, and that physician or physician assistant or RN would be able to prescribe everything that the doctor does. They can also prescribe things like PT and OT, and the PT for physical training can help with additional items that would be subscribed by the physical therapist, prescribed by the physical therapist. And then OT, your occupational training, is going to help more with the household things. And I was very surprised when my dad needed some of those services. It was even before he was diagnosed with his Parkinson's. He was just a veteran like anyone else, not with a rated disability, and he was getting services, home care services through the VA. Now, Visiting Angels is a VA approved home care provider. So it's very good that they're the sponsor for our program today. And if you do need home care services and you're in an area where Visiting Angels is a provider, you can speak to them about getting the home care services paid for by the VA. Again, it needs to be authorized by a VA doctor, but that's a very important part of it. But back to the question where a VA provider is 25 miles away, they're probably going to expect you to go to that VA location for those services unless there is a hardship for that veteran being able to travel or be transported without causing a hardship or a safety issue to himself or the family. So definitely talk to your Office of Care Coordination about that. Reach out to them. Every VA regional facility has an Office of Care Coordination. So speak to an Office of Care Coordinator. That is their job all day, every day, is to help coordinate the care for the veteran. They will also let you know if there are other options to that are possibly closer. For instance, if you're not getting good service or it's a hardship maybe to travel to the VA to get chiropractic service, they may be able to authorize chiropractic in the community and through the community care program. So again, that needs to be authorized by the VA doctor, and they would say they will give an authorization number, and the authorization number is how that community service provider gets paid by the VA to perform services for that veteran. Dexter, do you feel that I answered that question okay?
I believe so, Scott. We have
Great.
another.
Sure, let's
Let me
go
read
into
this
it.
to you. So, somebody just said she is interested in spouse and children of wartime veteran who never obtained services himself. So that's the spear that he or she is interested in.
Sure. Now, for the children, it's a pretty narrow window. The children would need to be adult disabled, typically from the age of minority, meaning before they were age 18, and they continue to be disabled and a dependent of the veteran or the spouse. Now there are some things where if there are birth defects, such as with Agent Orange, that's going to go directly to the child, and the child can work with the VA directly on that also. For widows, there are somewhat limited benefits unless it's a very special circumstance, like they were exposed to, maybe they were stationed in an area like Camp Lejeune and they were exposed to the contaminated water, then they would have a claim of their own to file for that. If they're going off of the veterans benefits, the DIC claim that I mentioned earlier, such as what my mother gets, that is available to a widow of a veteran that prematurely deceased due to his illness or injury caused by their military service. And they would have had to have had a claim filed with the VA prior to their demise. The other benefit is the aid and attendance benefit that we're going to get a little bit more into here shortly. There are some special criteria on that, and well, I'll cover a little bit of that right now. The veteran needed to serve during a wartime period, but the confusing part about that is many people think they needed to be in a war or in combat or boots on the grounds somewhere, and that is not the case. It only means that the veteran needed to serve 1 day of their 90 days consecutive active duty service that's outside of training, 1 day of that served during a wartime period. So even if they were stationed in Annapolis the entire time, or maybe a little closer to me and at my alma mater, Fort Dix, New Jersey, or Willow Grove Air Station, or Dover Air Force Base, they could have been stateside the entire time if their dates of service were during a wartime period, meaning that they were available to go to war, even if they did not serve in active combat. So they would need to do that. A doctor would need to verify that this spouse or veteran needs the aid and attendance of another person, which I'll expand on here shortly. They need to show that their income in its entirety, their gross income, is being spent on their cost of care or other unreimbursed medical expenses that are paid for out of pocket. And then there is an asset limitation. So the asset limitation is currently at 159,000 and I believe $248, but roughly 159,000 minus 1 month of gross income. So if they have a $3,000 a month gross income, their target number is going to be in that area of about 156,000 in gross assets, liquid assets. Um, Now, part of the way we can help plan with that, let's say they're a little bit over that dollar amount in the asset column, and there's a husband and wife, and maybe they're at $180,000. Well, if we were to take $15,000 and prepay a couple of funerals, which is an allowable expenditure and not considered a gift by the VA or Medicaid, we would prepay those funerals today and we can apply for benefits tomorrow rather than waiting until they spend down, which may be a year or more away to spend down that $30,000. So there are strategies and ways to plan around how to get the benefits. And that's one of the benefits that we bring to the table, being able to bring that information and plan those strategies and put them together for families, whereas the county office is not really allowed to give you planning advice. They're not allowed to um, implement or help you with strategies on how to become qualified or even verify certain information, like is the doctor's note good enough? Whatever you give them for the doctor's information that's provided, they're going to send it into a processor and the processor will make that determination. So if it's right, wrong, or if it's different, or even if it's not filled out correctly, they may or may not be able to, may not even know that. And if they are, they're very limited on the amount of advice they can give you. They can tell you basics like, oh, well, your assets are too high. Maybe you should come back later, where we could put a plan together for you to get those assets reduced in accountable fashion and apply for benefits much sooner. Um, so Dexter, that question, did we get everything answered on that? And is there another question that you'd like to address?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Let me again read one for you. Can tell me again the vet rec email. Did you drop the email or was that a
Uh,
website?
yeah, it is vetrecs, VETRECS .archives.gov.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
share that in the chat
And
again. Scott,
yep,
okay.
can you still hear me?
Let us see what happened to
Can you
Scott.
still hear me? I see my screen stopped. Can you still hear me? Dexter, can you still hear me?
Oh, there, you're back. You are back.
Okay. It looks like it
Okay.
changed my camera on me. Yep, sure did. Must
Yeah, it did.
yeah. So did you get the information on VetRex? Did you hear me tell you that okay?
Yes, and I will be reposting it here on the chat box for now. And read to you one more question. If a veteran registers for VA healthcare, can he or she choose which services to obtain? For example, can they choose to go to a community PCP, non-VA, but get hearing aids through the VA?
It sounds like the answer to that is no, if I'm understanding it correctly, because if you are going to get services through the VA, a civilian doctor cannot prescribe services through the VA. Only a VA doctor can do that. So, for instance, like we were saying, for the hearing aids or the glasses, you would have to have a VA doctor give the referral to another VA doctor that's an optometrist or an audiologist, or that department, and they would have to issue the glasses. Now, the primary care physician can take a record from a civilian doctor, such as an eye test or an audiology test, and that VA primary care physician can put that in the file, and then the audiology department or the optometry department can use that. So there are some things that can be used, but you can't just go out to any civilian doctor and ask them to give you VA benefits. That's not how it works. That civilian doctor can make their recommendation or do their assessment, and then the VA doctor can take that assessment and put it in your file. And they may or may not make comments to go along with that. But if you do have a civilian doctor that is more agreeable and more helpful and willing to write the right information and fill out the right forms to get that put into your file, then that would be helpful. But you do have to go through a VA primary care physician to get VA benefits.
All right. I have here Grace raising her hand. Does she have a question here? Let me just press allow talk. She probably has a question. Let's try
Okay.
that.
Hi,
Grace,
Grace.
I have allowed you to talk. If you have a question, you can unmute and give your question.
Yes, I do. I was at I was at Camp Lejeune the complete time while my husband was there. However, I have sent so many forms and I didn't get any answers. Now, my daughter-in-law, I thought perhaps since he married, my son remarried because he was only going to elementary school when he was there. Now, who should be getting that money? And we haven't, she's written and I've written, and we haven't gotten any information. So I'm doing something wrong, and I don't know what it is.
Okay. Um, so I'm not a total expert in that field. I know a little bit about it because of my father being there. And there are two things that can be filed for. Now, I don't know if you can still file a claim with the government, um, because they have opened it up that you're able to basically sue the government because of what happened. And then there's the VA benefits to go along with it. So now I would point you to the eligibility department that I mentioned earlier. Contact them and see what information they have. And if you would like to speak to an attorney about that, the attorney that we used is Anapol Weiss in Philadelphia. There are attorneys all over the country that do it. There may be attorneys that are closer to you, but I do know that Anapol Weiss helps people all over the country, not just people that are in the Philadelphia area where their office is. So um, if you give me just 1 second, I'll do a quick search on that. And Anapol Weiss Law Office. And it is ANAPOL and their phone number is 215-608-9645. Dexter, you had another question?
Yeah, so from Adina, for aid and attendance, you said the service member needed to be 1 day during wartime. Is it that 1 day active duty? My dad was in the reserves for 30 years after basic training, but not sure if he was active duty for any time.
To answer the question, yes, it does need to be active duty, and it needs to be 90 days of consecutive active duty service outside of training. So if they are a reservist and they only had training, then it's not going to qualify unless their unit was called to active duty for more than 90 days, and then one of those 90 days was during that wartime period. Dexter, is there another question?
I believe that's everything, so you can proceed to your topic, Scott. Thank you.
Okay, so let me talk about that aid and attendance benefit a little bit more. Um, as I had said, there are 5 basic things that the VA is going to look at. They're going to look at the dates of service that we just described. We need the doctor to verify that we need the aid and attendance of another person on a regular basis. And typically what they're going to look for is they're going to look for 2 activities of daily living. Now, activities of daily living are going to be things like bathing and showering, dressing and undressing, uh, toileting or handling your own incontinence products, being able to transfer from a bed to a chair and back, or being able to put food into your own mouth. And the reason, and again, the food into your own mouth and eating is different than meal preparation. We're not talking about meal preparation. We're talking about being able to take a fork or a spoon, pick food up off of a plate, and feed yourself. Okay? That's considered the activity of daily living. So the we need that verification from a doctor. We have to look at the gross income and make sure that we have enough medical expense to calculate that down to 0. Now, I get this question all the time. What is the income limitation? The income limitation is a calculation. It is not a set number. We've had families that have had a $7,000 a month income and they still qualify for the benefit because they had $7,000 a month in assisted living cost. So for VA purposes, they have $0 left over at the end of the month. Okay? It's a calculation, it's not a hard number. So when it comes to income, we can use things like medical expense. It could be home care expenses that you're paying visiting angels. That can go into the calculation. It can be health insurance costs, what they pay for Medicare Part B, what they pay for supplemental insurance. Things like medications sometimes do not count because medications can be changed on a monthly basis by a doctor. It's not what they call consistent and recurring. We want to make sure that we're using medication or using unreimbursed medical expenses that are considered consistent and recurring. Now, another thing, we find very often that if you were to tell somebody at a veteran service center, maybe a congressman's office, a veterans liaison, a county office, and you tell them, hey, we have long-term care insurance to help pay for our assisted living cost or our home care costs. Oftentimes their knee-jerk reaction is, if you have long-term care insurance, you can't get the benefit. But that is not necessarily true. A good example of that would be a long-term care benefit that pays $6,000 a month. And if the assisted living cost is $6,000 a month, then if the long-term care pays for it and they still have their income left over, then that's right. They wouldn't qualify for the benefit because it's not an out-of-pocket expense. But we've worked with long-term care companies, and they're usually very agreeable to give you less money if they can. So we asked the long-term care company, will you pay out half of that benefit? And this way we've stretched the long-term care policy out for twice as long. Well, by taking half of the benefit, and let's say that's $3,000 a month, and if the husband, the veteran or the spouse, or veteran and spouse together, let's say they have $3,000 a month in income, well, that plus the $3,000 a month from the long-term care policy is $6,000 a month, and that is the same amount as their unreimbursed medical expenses of assisted living or home care costs. Well, now it still calculates down to zero, and we get that added benefit from the VA coming in. And we meet the calculations, and the long-term care policy will stretch out for twice as long. So there's some magic in the numbers if we know how to do it. The benefit for the aid and attendance that comes from the VA for a widow is $1,515 per month. For a single veteran or veteran that is applying on their own and the veteran needs care, that is $2,358 a month. For a veteran that needs care and has a dependent, such as a spouse or an adult disabled child, that benefit is $2,795 per month. So you can see it's a pretty significant amount that can help pay for care. Now, it might not cover all of the costs or all of the shortfall for the home care needs or the assisted living costs, but it is definitely a worthwhile benefit to pursue to get that extra money. You know, we're talking about over $18,000 to potentially over $30,000 per year coming in that does not have to come out of that veteran or that widow's savings. So it's a very significant benefit. And again, keep in mind, it is means tested. So it does have an asset limitation currently of around $159,000. Now, if someone does have more than that, there are good reasons that we could still talk about it, and we could help with some planning services to go along with that. The VA has what's called a 3-year look back period. That is very similar to what Medicaid has. Medicaid has a 5-year look back period. So that means for Medicaid purposes, if there was a transfer of assets for less than fair market value, anytime in that period 5 years prior to applying for Medicaid, they would assess a penalty for that. The VA adopted the same thing in, actually it was on the 18th of October of 2018, that they adopted a 3-year look back period, meaning they will look back for 3 years prior to the application. And if there was a transfer of asset for less than fair penalty for that.
All right. So here, if my dad can't remember if he had 90 days of consecutive active duty, where can I find that information? Is this on the DD 214? And I guess the next question is also related from another person. How can my granddad revive records that were destroyed to prove he served in the army?
So let me answer the first question. Yes, the dates of service are going to be verified by looking at that DD 214. There are other forms that are called separation documents. For instance, Navy in the early years, maybe before Korea, WDAG, WDAGO 50, 55, and documents like that. But typically after 1950, which are most of our veterans now, it's going to be a DD 214. Okay. If you don't have that, you would request it through the vet recs that I mentioned earlier. And for the person that asked a question about not having the records, you would send for it through vet recs. If you do not have a copy of anything and they do not have a copy of anything at the National Archives, The only thing that we've seen is that you would have to find someone that was, I believe they said it was for their grandfather, someone that was in the military with their grandfather. That person would have to prove to the VA or the National Archives that they were in the military, and then they would have to make some legal attestation and get some documents done through an attorney's office that would that they would basically swear under oath that they were in the military with that person. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I will tell you that we did have a family that had to go through that. That's how they did it. And it took them about 2 years just to get through that process of it. So it's very difficult. And that's why I was very adamant when I was saying earlier, if you do have discharge papers, don't give them out to anyone. Now, let me add this. If you have something that's not a discharge paper, let's say you have something that you found in granddad's footlocker and it's a include to send your request in to the National Archives or to Vet Rex. They may be able to take something off of that and find his name on a roster. Even if you have something like a letter that was mailed to an APO, which is an Army Post Office. If you have something like that, send that in with your request, and the National Archives may be able to find some information on there and cross-reference it. So maybe it was an APO that goes to his unit, and they could look that up and they could rebuild or recreate enough records and give you a letter of certification that says we can verify that this veteran was in service based on the information that we received. Dexter, you had your
Yeah.
hand up, I see, so you have a
Yes.
question?
We have two more questions. I believe we can get this
Sure,
with
let's
our
squeeze them in
final
before,
5 minutes
let's
of the
squeeze them in.
session. Let's squeeze them in. All right. How long can it take to get aid and attendance approved? And what if the vet passes away in the process? Does that go to the estate of the service member?
Right, so it's typically, like if you look on the VA website, it will say expect 9 to 12 months or more for an approval time. Now, luckily, we can help with that. We are, know how to use that fully developed claim process, and typically we get things turned around in about 90 to 120 days. If there's a second step added to that where a fiduciary is needed, sometimes the VA left to their own devices, they would stretch that out another 6 months, but we already know the games that they're going to play with that, and we condense that down into about 30 days. As far as the veteran passing away, if it is just a veteran alone and the veteran passes away, then they will not pay the benefits to the estate. If there is a widow left behind, the widow can apply for what is called accrued benefits of that, and they can potentially for the benefits, pay those benefits to the widow. Now, family members, there is one exception to that. If there are outstanding bills that have to do with a funeral, medical, or legal services, the VA can pay a portion of those retroactive due benefits or accrued benefits to those bills. But what we've found is that the bill collectors are typically hammering the families, and they're on them to get them done and pay them. The families pay them from the money from the estate, or they pay them themselves, and then they think they're going to get reimbursed from the VA out of the retroactive benefits, and that's not going to happen because the VA will only pay that bill collector directly if the bill is still outstanding. And it takes months to go through the process, and the collectors are typically hounding the families to get the money before that, and they cave in and they pay it. Was there another question, Dexter, before we finish up?
Yeah, last 2 minutes. So here, I came online when you were almost done with the reservist being qualified for VA loan. If I can get more clarification, I did 6 months at a school which is regarded as an active status time as a reservist, and I am now a reservist at my reserve center. Do I qualify for VA loan? Do I need to switch to active for me to qualify for my VA loan?
Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information about VA loans, but I would contact your local real estate agent or mortgage company and ask them specifically if they know about VA loans or if they handle VA loans. Probably the mortgage company is the one you would want to reach out to, and they would be able to give you some better direction on what would uh, qualify and make you eligible for the VA loans.
I guess that's it. We have our final minute. Thank you very much, Scott. You're a buzzer
Okay.
beater. That's a buzzer beater there. So, yes, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this session as much as I did. Thank you very much for joining us, Scott. You're one of the crowd favorite here in Visiting Angels Coffee Chat. Anyway, just a quick reminder, everyone, we host these coffee chats every third Wednesday of the month. So we hope to see you again. You will get an invitation via email. Also, we'll be sending out replay along with useful resources if you need to. So watch out for that in your email inbox. And if you'd like to catch more content like this, feel free to follow our YouTube channel as well. And that will be sent to you via email also. And I will also be dropping the link in our chat box here so that you could check out our other content, our other previous uploads, and that would be useful to to everyone. I'm dropping it here now. And yes, we will also be dropping the contact of Scott here. If you have further questions that we cannot answer now, you can contact Scott at contact@vbap.org. So again, CONTACT contact@vbap.org. Lastly, if you're someone or you know someone who could use non-medical in-home support, Visiting Angels is here to help. We're a proud approved service provider for seniors and families in the area, offering compassionate care right where it matters most, which is at your home. Scott, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you very much for joining. Until next time, take care, and thanks again. If you have final message, Scott, stage is yours.
No, thank you, Dexter, for putting this together. Thank you, Visiting Angels, for being a provider for VA benefits to veterans and for sponsoring our program today. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope we can help you more in the future. Feel free to contact me or my office anytime. Thank you, everybody.
At Visiting Angels, we're committed to enriching the lives of elders and their significant others. Our monthly coffee chat sessions aim to make your lives easier and better by providing quality information from our expert panelists. We're here to elevate your quality of life, offer practical wisdom, and ensure you have access to valuable insights. See you again next third Wednesday of the month.